And you've just heard Seneca Falls, the opening track on Dance of the Atoms, the debut album from beautiful Cosmos. And I'm delighted to be joined by Anna Miles and Matt Brennan from the band. Hello, both.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Really good. Really good. Now, I don't know who wants to take this first, but my question is, before we talk about the album, how did Beautiful Cosmos come about?
We'll let you do that one.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess first thing to say is that Anna and I are married. So we met when we were both in our 20s, now a long time ago, when we were playing in indie bands in and around Glasgow. And we're just sort of part of the same music scene, I guess. And so we obviously knew that one another made music. That's how we met, but we had never tried to write songs together. And I think for many years, in the kind of first years of our relationship, we were kind of afraid to even try to do that because we knew that one another could be kind of creatively strong-willed, and
that's very diplomatic.
And it seemed like a silly reason to I don't know, to like unneeded stress when you're in a relationship. But then now we're like 15 years into that relationship, and we kind of felt that the writing project could be a disaster, and we could just kind of chalk it up to like, oh well, we'll not do that again, but like we would survive it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It felt like we had kind of stress tested ourselves. But I guess the other thing was, like, alongside that, we had also for years just been curious about like what it would be like to make music together. And
our music wasn't so wildly different, really. So yeah. And yeah, so it's a curiosity thing as much as anything else. And a fun thing, because we played some covers and stuff before for like party pieces or whatever, and that was always fun.
Yeah, like friends might invite us to sing at their wedding or something like that, but we'd never written our own songs together.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was time to do that. And yeah, in the last year or so, we were just chipping away, working on some tunes together.
Yeah.
So how did that begin? You just kind of dipping your toe into it, and how do you work together? How do you've just begun this process. How did it kind of pan out? Was there clear lines, or everything kind of worked together?
First, no, we tried a few different things at first, and not everything worked. I think ultimately what we hit on in the end was me coming to Matt often with some melodies. You would kind of flesh them out. We'd both contribute to lyrics. Because there was parts where we were trying things like singing poetry from books and things just to kickstart things. But yeah, there's a few false starts, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess I went into the studio with Andy Monahan, who I'd worked with before from Frightened Rabbit, and he has this lovely space in the East End of Glasgow. And because initially, I think the idea was that you wanted me to write some songs for you to sing.
Initially, yeah.
And so I went in with him and worked on some instrumentals, and then tried to write some melodies over them, and got Anna to sort of imagining what Anna's voice would sound like over top of that. And the thing is, I got it wrong. And so it was when Anna sang, it's not that she couldn't sing the melodies, you absolutely could, but it felt like what was really distinctive about your voice was that you shaped your own melodies in a way that was instinctive to you, that was difficult for me to kind of guess in advance. And what makes your voice to me like special are these like natural little turns in the melody and the shape of the melody that don't come intuitively to me. So then we tried a different way where Anna would come with the melody to me, and then I'd try and add something underneath that to develop it. And that ended up working pretty well.
Yeah, and there was kind of some songs that came more from Matt and some more from me, and then some more collaborative. So it was kind of it worked out in the end. So yeah, it was a really fun process in the end.
Yeah, totally. And we had help.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the help in a moment, because the band you had when I saw you play live the other night was fantastic. But interesting, I spoke to Christopher Brookmeyer, who writes books as Ambrose Parry with his wife, and they go into different rooms and then show each other work, come back. It's a really, really interesting process. So I guess everyone, you know, it's a different thing. But when you discovered that that was working, did you know straight away, yes, we've got the makings of an album in these songs?
I think it was always in our mind that we would try and make enough songs to do an album, you know, unless we got stuck, of course. But fortunately, that didn't happen. And it strikes me like another thing. I guess I'm primarily a drummer. That's what I'm most comfortable doing in terms of instruments. I have a bash and other things, but yeah, it's like a drummer trying to play guitar, you know, bang bang. It sort of works, but so you would come with melodies, and then I would often play drums. And so if we had a kind of groove,
I'd play piano
and melody,
yeah,
we had the kind of bottom and the top of a song, and then it was a matter of kind of like filling in the other bits. But those were two, you know, at least in terms of like pop songs that I like, you know, it often has like a good beat and a good melody, a good, you know, vocal, and the rest is sort of sprinkling ornamentation all around the foundations of it. So that kind of worked for us.
I used to play a lot more piano in my last band, and I just get terrible stage fright. So I try and play. I just prefer to sing and play flute these days. But when I'm writing songs, I play piano a lot more, so that kind of fills it out a bit.
And Matt, you mentioned the word pop there. How would you describe the album to people? How do you describe the album to people?
I guess both of us come from playing in indie bands of one sort, whatever that term means.
Indie pop, I suppose.
Yeah, indie pop. So that it basically means pop that's actually not commercially successful often. And you know, or pop that has some sort of quirk to it.
Yeah.
But also, you know, drawing on a tradition of, you know, the classic sort of you know, drums, bass, guitar, keys, that sort of instrumentation, playing with live musicians rather than having it be, you know, something that you would produce entirely on a laptop or something like that. Computers were involved, but you know, there were also musicians in a room playing together in a kind of, well, we're both fans of the Beatles, and so, you know, that kind of classic you know, band setup, I guess. So I don't know if that's too vague a description, but that's sort of how we think of it.
I would say quirky indie pop is a kind of perfect description of it. And Anna, you mentioned that when you played previously, you would often get stage fright. So how was it playing live again? Was that your first time in a long time?
In a long time, yeah. Well, definitely since, am I right in thinking, well, certainly since just before the pandemic, when we sang a song on stage together with, for Matt's Ivor Cutler project last time. But certainly in terms of my own band, it's been many, many, many years. I want to say over a decade, actually. Absolutely terrifying, Ali. I was absolutely terrified. Yeah, I get terrible stage fright, but I've been doing visualizations. I've been doing everybody's been dead nice about it, and the crowd was so nice as well on Saturday for the album launch, and it made a huge difference. So
Yeah, it was a very friendly room, wasn't it? You just
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, Matt, you did look, when you got behind the drums, you really looked at home. You went, oh, yeah, this is his happy place, I think.
Oh, it's just super fun, and playing with musicians who are better than yourself, you know, is just like the greatest joy, you know, because they kind of make you sound better than you are, and you're just sort of floating in, you know, you're like, oh, wow, you know, this actually sounds pretty good, and you're listening to, you know, these other musicians on stage. Yeah, in the same way, you know, as if I was an audience member, really, you know, like I could listen to our bandmates play all day long just by themselves, and it would, you know, I'd go see that, you know, so that's a very lucky position to be in.
And it was a really fantastic group you had there. And do they play, you should maybe say who they are, and then do they play on the album as well?
Yeah, so I guess in the live band, we've got Bart Owl on bass, who's a kind of well-known face in and around Glasgow, plays in many, many different groups.
Eagle Owl,
and
the gazillions others.
Yeah, Broken Chanter, he's playing with them this week. And so he plays bass, and he plays bass on a couple of tracks on the
Right.
record as well.
Gabrielle and Fans he
Yep.
plays on. Yep.
And my friend Les on guitar. He's my day job is as an academic in the music department at Glasgow Uni, and Les works in the sociology department, and so we played in a few different groups. He's from London, but he moved up a couple of years ago, and so he plays on those same two tracks on the album, Gabrielle and Fans in the Shadows. And those two tracks actually we initially did with Andy Monahan in Glasgow, and recorded them live in a room. And so those were, I guess, like the first two tracks that took shape for the record.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I got a small grant from UNESCO Glasgow City of Music to be able to do a couple of days recording with Andy. And I'm a big Frank Rabbit fan as well, so that was a delight. And then the rest of the songs are us and Peter Bruce and David Bruce from Field Music, which frankly still feels wild to say. What a dream that it was. Really great. We went down to their studio in Sunderland and had an absolute ball. It was really good.
And how did that come about? How did that connection happen?
What's the quick way? Okay, it's so long and convoluted. Okay, so when Twitter was a nice place, many moons ago, I followed Field Music on Twitter, and they posted about, does anybody know any good drum books to read? And this man here happens to have written The Social History of the Drum Kit. So I posted them a link to it and said, oh, you should definitely read that. And they did. I completely forgot about the tweet, but they both read the book, loved it, and then messaged Matt and got in touch with Matt, which we were very delighted about. And then we actually went to go see a gig in which Sarah Hayes was playing in Oranmore, and bumped into Peter in person there, hit it off really quickly. I am a Geordie, although I don't sound like it pre-alcohol. It comes out when I've had a few drinks. And Peter is a Mackem, and we have a Northeast connection as well. We hit it off straight away. And I don't know how the topic of recording came about. You were
well, I guess, yeah, for those who know Field Music, if you're a fan of that band, and everyone should be, of course, you'll know that they come from a place of really deep musicianship and knowledge, and they have a real interest in history as well. So I'm a music historian by profession, really, and so we really just found that we could nerd out very easily together. And also, I guess I had worked with Sarah Hayes, Peter's partner, in a couple of different musical projects. One was many years ago, maybe the first time I met Sarah, actually. We were both hired to play in a band for Stuart Murdoch's musical film God Help the Girl.
Oh, yes.
And so in the on-screen band for that, I was the drummer and Sarah was the keyboard player, and so we hung out during the filming of that. And then years later, when I was working on this project, this tribute album to Ivor Cutler, reimagining his work, Sarah was involved in recording that, and then also involved in the live band for that. So know Sarah mostly from musical collaborations of various sorts.
And speaking of amazing musicians, she's absolutely astonishing. Like, I mean, anyway.
Yeah, no, she's an amazing
incredible
musician. But anyway, so Peter comes up to Glasgow reasonably frequently via that connection, and once we had kind of become friends on social media just through being drum geeks together, started talking about what one another was up to, I guess. And then at some point, David, I think it was David, actually said that they were thinking of maybe taking on some production work, and so I messaged them and said, they might, I don't know if this would feel too much like amateur hour for you guys, but my wife and I have been trying to work on a little project together, and it'd be great to have a chat about it, and they were totally up for it, much to our shock. And then the more we talked about it, the more it made sense to to have a go. So the two of us went down to Sunderland to their studio space, and it just worked super well. We're also Peter and David and I guess, we're all roughly the same age as well. So immediately we had all sorts of cultural touchstones as well, musical touchstones. We like a lot of the same things. So
And
yeah.
also, it just we'd bring them demos and then sort of form a live band together and work things out that way, which was a dream.
Yeah,
It's really fun.
They like to play live in a room, record live in a room, I guess. So it was for the bulk of the album, the sessions were sort of myself on drums, David from Field Music on bass, and Peter on guitar, just putting things together live in a room. And that was just so much fun, man. Gosh, those guys are, I don't know, it's just a very joyful feeling, being in a room, being able to make music with those dudes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that joy comes over, well, it came over live and it comes over in the album as well, no doubt about it. We should talk a little bit about Donut Music Lab, which is the label the album is out on, but that's an interesting story.
Yeah, sure. So Donut Music Lab, I guess, it's an art and research collective, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, along with some other artists and researchers. And I guess it's where sort of my daytime identity as an academic at a university and my nighttime identity as a musician, just interested in making art come together. I have a real research interest in music and environmental sustainability, and those may not seem like they have an obvious connection, but I, like many people, I'm just kind of terrified of the impacts of climate change. And from a justice perspective, it also feels important. I keep getting told that addressing climate change and environmental concerns is a sort of all hands on deck situation. And working in a university, I bump into other academics who are, a lot of us are kind of working on this. It's maybe humanity's most pressing challenge. And I ask those folk, talk to fellow academics and ask if there's any role whatsoever for music and the arts to play in being involved, just so that one can feel that you're doing something. And I got talking to some engineers and some scientists at the uni, and they're doing this big project called Gallant, which is all about using Glasgow as a living lab, which is a kind of interesting concept that they and others have taken. So they're sort of doing experiments in the city to think about how Glasgow might decarbonize, and there wasn't really a musical component to that project. And so I started working with those folk on thinking about, what would music look like in a post-fossil fuel future, and how would we get there? And so the donut aspect comes from actually this concept called donut economics, which an Oxford economist named Kate Raworth invented. This is a really long answer, Ali. Sorry about that. But the donut basically is an alternative economic model where she says that you need sort of enough economic activity to provide a social foundation for humanity. So to provide the basic human rights like education, shelter, housing, water. There should also be a space for culture, cultural expression, and participation in that, I think, although it's not in the original donut. But that's kind of something we're adding into it. And, for me, that's the future I want to live in, a future where you can make art, right? That has to be part of a post-fossil fuel future. And that's the inner ring of the donut. So you can think of like the economy kind of gurgling away to provide those basic needs for all the people in the world. But there shouldn't be this unchecked growth that is at the moment really tied to fossil fuel burn that makes us overshoot the ecological ceiling or the outer ring of the donut. And so Kate Raworth and lots of other people, including folk at Glasgow Uni, are interested in this concept. This Gallant project I was mentioning is very much underpinned by that concept. And as I said, there wasn't really any space for music within that at the time that I was talking to folks. So Donut Music Lab is a way to just kind of jump into that space and have a play and see what we can do. And so we run experiments, thinking about decarbonization, thinking about what shape musical life might take in this post-fossil fuel future. And so as part of that, we put out a couple of albums just on the weekend, including Beautiful Cosmos, as a kind of artistic intervention.
And there's no vinyl.
Yeah, so
There's no new vinyl.
That was the interesting thing, because I've actually got it here for people.
Yay.
Oh, amazing.
It's a beautiful cover, and it's got all the artwork in it, plus an explanation about Donut Music Lab and all these things.
There you go.
But it's a really interesting way of doing it, because, you know, I think people do want physical things, but not necessarily perhaps to kind of, as you said, you know, Matt, on the night, you like your music, you like your vinyl, but it is something that has to be considered. And then my question is Beautiful Cosmos, was that because of Donut Music Lab, or was Donut Music Lab there to be able to kind of put the music out?
I think actually Donut Music Lab came before.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, as we said, for years, Anna and I have been thinking about doing something together, but I remember distinctly talking to Susan Bear, who's actually our neighbor in Woodlands in Glasgow, and just having a chat with her. There was something about vinyl records that just made me feel just a little uneasy. Like, I do love them and I do buy them, and I'm not anti-vinyl at all. But it would just feel nicer if we didn't have to take new oil out of the ground to make them, and to move towards some sort of renewable material. And until such time that becomes something that you can do at scale, it felt worth drawing attention to the fact that we're not quite there yet. And so I was talking to Susan about this and saying, like, how stupid an idea would it be to print a really nice vinyl sleeve, but not have the plastic component in the plastic record, and instead maybe some of the money that you would have paid to press up that vinyl, you would instead pay a visual artist to make some really nice art inserts, or just kind of soup up all of the visual artwork that you could put inside. You would have a download code.
It's plant-based inks on recycled paper as well.
Yeah, the sleeves themselves are. Yeah.
So it's a nice element. I mean, I think also it links into a lot of work you've been doing as well, to do with people like Taylor Swift fans who will buy 12 copies of Midnights or whatever, and not play the vinyl.
Well, yeah,
I'm simplifying here. There's a lot more to it than that, but
yeah, I sort of had these hunches, which are maybe just stating the obvious, that, like, even for vinyl heads who buy records, folk, like, I will often listen to an album that I own on vinyl, but I will listen to it on my phone, right? To listen to that album, I don't always pick up the record, and I suspected other people's behaviors were probably pretty similar. And so just talking to artists anecdotally, like, okay, is this a stupid idea? What are your actual vinyl listening habits like? Could we actually, like, do some research on that and do a survey of listeners? So we're working on such a survey right now. Actually, that's another experiment in the lab, to kind of see if there's a broader appetite beyond just the handful of artists that I happen to know for this idea. And even if there isn't, that's not a problem. It's really about starting a conversation around these issues and trying to imagine a way towards a musical future where we're not taking that oil out of the ground.
And Taylor Swift is an element. I'm not just picking on Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I had an undergraduate student do their dissertation on Taylor Swift last year, and she did this really great piece of research on Taylor's marketing strategies for her recorded music, because Taylor, in the most recent year that we've got really robust stats, 2023, she was the top selling artist on vinyl, not surprisingly, and she sold close to 4 million records, I think. So I would be really curious about that younger generation that's listening to her. You know, she appeals to all ages, of course, and we like Taylor as well, but, you know, sort of thinking about like, why are they purchasing vinyl? You know, what do they do with it? What are their motivations for collecting those records? And would there be any appetite among that crowd for having just the artwork, just the sleeve? Would that actually satisfy what they get out of purchasing that? And then when you think about it at that scale, and I'll give you a sneak preview. We're crunching the numbers on that right now, actually, but we surveyed over 1,000 Swifties. So we have that data right now. We're analyzing it, and you know, 1 in 4 are open to that possibility of getting, you know, of maybe purchasing something that's sleeve only with a sort of minimum of plastic involved. And, you know, when you're talking Taylor numbers, that's 1 million records, right? So that then it becomes kind of interesting, more than just you know, a little tiny indie band putting out, you know, 100 sleeves of their own. It's a bigger conversation that might happen or might not. But that's the kind of some of the thinking underpinning all this. Yeah.
I think the idea of starting conversations, and I could hear conversations even on the night when you spoke about it, is absolutely what's, you know, what it does. Because often people, in the way they buy any art, they're kind of, you know, get into a certain, yes, that's what it is. And yes, it'll change when format changes, but this could be the next change in format or something like that, or at least a movement from that.
Yeah, or, you know, just a different way of doing things. You know, the formats can coexist together as well. I think one thing that really struck me when I was starting to dig into this issue was eco vinyl, which is, you know, something that's quite trendy at the moment. And I wanted to know what was eco about it. So I looked into it a little bit, and essentially, you know, people are trying. Lots of people are trying to work on solutions towards this, but at the moment, eco vinyl seems to be about just making vinyl pressing plants more efficient. So when folk are printing vinyl, pressing vinyl, the offcuts of the plastic that fall to the ground, back in the day, they would have just thrown those in the bin, and now they're taking those offcuts from the floor and using them to press eco vinyl, and that's the eco bit. It's basically an efficiency. It's the same plastic as the new plastic in the new vinyl, and both eco vinyl and fresh pressed new vinyl without that badge on it are both necessarily taking new oil out of the ground to make those things. You know, so for me, I'm kind of like, well, we can do better than that, surely. You know, so yeah, just asking questions is part of it. You know.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I just wanted to mention, the night you launched your album, you also launched Double Lies by Diljit Kaur Basu,
Yeah.
which was a sensational set. I'm sure you agree. So how did that come about? How, you know, because that's, I guess, it's just 2 launches at the moment, 2 albums at the moment.
That's right. Yeah.
That come about?
Well, Diljit was the first person I asked when thinking about this project, because I've known her for probably a decade now. She also has an academic past. I guess she did her PhD in the same music department that I worked at a few years back at Edinburgh Uni. And so we got to be friends just from being in the same building over the years. And then at a certain point, well, actually, again, for this Ivor Cutler album, I needed a flute player on the record, and I knew that she played flute, but I'd never heard her play flute. So this was back in 2019, and she came in, and I had heard she was good, you know, but I hadn't actually heard her play, and she came in and just absolutely blew my mind with her technique and her musicianship, and also just like her openness as well. And and Diljit is one of these really modest, self-effacing people where, you know, we've talked, I guess, since then, really, like since that project, I said, like, you know, so when's your album coming out? You know, people have to know, you can't be this secret. You know, and she's not a secret. She works a lot in the sort of improvisation world and the experimental music scene, but still she had never produced an album of her own work. And so as soon as I thought about, well, maybe it'd be fun to start a project where we might actually release some albums.
Yeah.
Diljit was the first person that I thought, oh, well, she's overdue, man, to put something out. Wouldn't it be great if we could put a record out from Diljit? And so that was something that we'd been talking about for a couple of years, and then in just the past year, it kind of coalesced, and then it finally happened, which is great.
Absolutely, it's great, and to see her live with yeah, it was mind blowing, really, to see her. It was absolutely sensational. Well, in a moment we're going to hear the title track from the album, but before that, will there be future releases, or is that too much to even consider, considering you've just launched 2 albums?
Yeah, I think we're gonna assess, you know, the project so far and what we've been doing. We've got a couple of ideas, not necessarily albums in mind at the moment, but different sorts of music experiments, and totally open to the notion of putting out more albums. But Donut Music Lab, I don't know, when I was trying to, and I still am currently trying to make sense of what it is, to be honest, but when I first came upon the name for it, folk were like, oh, it's a label, you're putting out albums. I'm like, no, man, it's not a label, it's a lab. We do experiments. And that could be putting out records in an unusual way to test an idea, or it could be doing a live event, or it could be, you know, surveying Swifties, or it could be a whole bunch of things. So I hope we're going to do more stuff. That stuff might include putting out recorded music, or it might be other things. It's an open question just now, but we got some ideas percolating for sure.
And Anna, do you think we'll have more Beautiful Cosmos? Has this been a successful thing all round?
It's been amazing. I feel really, really lucky. Really, really lucky to have worked with the incredible musicians that make up the band. You know, and for Field Music to produce the album. I'd love to do more stuff. Yeah.
We should also say one musician we didn't mention actually yet was, because Les and Bart were involved in the recording process.
That's true.
Peter and David were involved in the recording process, but in the live band, we have Krina Kayabihab from she's from the Philippines originally, but is living in Scotland now, and on keyboards. So she wasn't involved in the recording process, but when we had to put together a live band, we asked Krina, because she's an amazing keys player and singer as well.
And the only one of us with three kind of Filipino Grammys, is that correct?
Yeah, she's kind of a sensation in the Philippines. She's
Wow.
yeah, she's amazing. But again, like Diljit, she keeps it very
So
quiet.
honest. Yeah.
But we heard from a friend that she just in December, like last month, won major music awards in the Philippines
with her family for like soundtracked music and stuff.
Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But she's an amazing player as well. So if we were to make new music, I'd love to have Krina involved as well.
Yeah, it's been really fun, and just something that I'd love to continue. It's really nice to sing again. I've kind of in between sort of having my own bands and stuff years ago, I've done session singing for Butcher Boy, a couple of things for Bell and Sebastian, and things like Adam Stafford stuff as well. I just love it. I just love singing. So and it makes a difference when it's your stuff as well, and you hear it coming to life with the best band. So yeah, it's been great. I'd love to do more.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and an absolute pleasure listening to the album. So I hope there will be more, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much, Ali.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for buying the album. It's really kind of you. Really if you like it.
And this is Beautiful Cosmos, and the album's title track, dance of the atoms.